Hello, welcome to our mini-series Domestic Violence Education. I am your host, Wairimo Magwa, here with my teammates and editors Ella and Rabia to talk to you about domestic violence for our Gender Empowerment Project. Through this project, we're going to be talking to you about the connection between domestic violence and gender. At the end, we hope to have created a community that is more empathetic and understanding towards victims of domestic abuse. A community that is not only able to identify the signs of domestic abuse, but is equipped with the knowledge necessary to provide aid to those in need. And with that, let's get started with our first episode. Before we can discuss the connection between domestic violence and gender, we need to define domestic violence, or as I'll sometimes say, domestic abuse. The UN defines domestic abuse as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Intimate meaning someone you have a close relationship with, not necessarily romantic. So, this abuse can come from a romantic partner, a family member, or a roommate. With this definition, we can understand domestic violence as an umbrella term for the abuse we see in romantic, familial, and platonic relationships. There are specific terms that define the relationship between the abuser and the victim, such as intimate partner violence for romantic relationships and family violence or abuse for familial relationships, both of which are used interchangeably with domestic violence. Now that we know the name of our issue, we can look at some of the ways this abuse can manifest. The UN highlights 5 major categories of abusive behaviors that we will reference through this project: emotional, psychological, physical, sexual, and financial. Starting with emotional, the UN lists behaviors such as humiliating the victim, isolating them, and withholding affection as punishment. Psychological abuse may look like gaslighting, stalking, or destruction of property. Physical abuse can look like the abuser causing physical harm to the victim with or without a weapon, but it can also look like the withholding or prevention of care or the harming of the victim's loved ones. Sexual abuse includes sexual harassment, objectification, and rape. The assault may be forced physically or through intimidation or coercion. Lastly, financial abuse takes the form of the abuser controlling the victim's financial situation. They may heavily monitor or question the victim's spending, or make it difficult for the victim to get or maintain employment. Note how there are behaviors that fit in multiple categories, but all of them serve to make the victim lose their autonomy to their abuser. Any mix of these behaviors can make the victim feel as if the health or happiness of themselves and potentially their loved ones is dependent on them staying with and appeasing their abuser. Now, this series will mainly focus on domestic violence in the US, so let's look at some statistics. According to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, intimate partner violence alone impacts over 12 million people a year, with over half of women and men having experienced psychological aggression from an intimate partner. We see gender differences when it comes to the type of abuse experienced, specifically rape, physical violence, and stalking. This kind of abuse has been experienced by 1/3 of women and 1/4 of men. Among these groups, 3/10 of women and 1/10 of men have reported that the abuse impacted their functioning. With physical abuse, 1/4 of women and 1/7 of men have been severely injured by their intimate partner. Among women, the age groups that experience intimate partner violence the most are women ages 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, with 77% and 76% being abused by a previous offender. With family abuse, we see a similar split between women and men as victims of violence. According to the Department of Justice, in 2002, 62% of murders were family murders, meaning one family member murdered another, and 58% of the victims were women. Among all murders in 2002 where the victim was female, family murders were responsible for 43% of the killings. Referring back to the 22% of family murders, we see that roughly 41% of them were spousal murders. Of those spousal murders, 83% of the killers were male. Now, let's take a moment to review what we've noticed. 1. Abuse is more common than most may think, with roughly 30% of Americans being victims of intimate partner violence alone. 2. Abusive behaviors may take autonomy from the victim, directly or indirectly, making it difficult for them to escape their abuser safely. And 3. In both intimate and familial relationships, women are more commonly the victims of abuse. From this information, we can ask, 1. What culture exists in America that contributes to these trends? And 2. What phenomena or theories can explain the connection between gender and domestic abuse? These are questions that we will spend the rest of the week exploring. Thank you so much for watching and learning with us, and join us tomorrow for episode 2.